Good afternoon, everyone. The College of the Holy Cross is living proof that faith is transnational. Here we are together at an institution founded on the principles of a group of men who lived in a country thousands of miles away across an ocean. As I assume you all know, the founder of the Jesuits, St. Ignatius of Loyola, was born in Spain, lived in Spain, and converted to religious life in Spain. With this knowledge and the fact that over 90% of Catholics, 90% of Spaniards proclaim themselves as Catholics, I arrived in Spain with thoughts that I would find a faith community similar to the one present at Holy Cross. That is, a welcoming community that proclaims their faith loudly, with music. I unfortunately did not find this, and for much of the year I struggled with my Catholic faith. I had a hard time accepting the quick and quiet masses of the city of León, Spain, and so when Holy Week came, and loud processions with floats and bands and thousands of people filled the streets, I thought to myself, finally, here we go. In the United States, I remember Holy Week as a solemn time. But in Spain, to me, it was more of a celebration. They had processions beginning on the Friday before Palm Sunday, ending on the Easter Sunday with the most important procession called El Encuentro, or the meeting. It was a dramatization of the meeting between Jesus and his mother Mary. This is an example of it in León, Spain. One of the more memorable processions that I attended was a procession on Good Friday. It's called the Solemn Procession of the Holy Burial in English. There were two floats. The first carried Jesus nailed to a cross. The second carried a coffin, which was a modern-day representation of the tomb. As the floats came to stop in front of the Cathedral of León, which is a very impressive cathedral, a man in the procession began to take the body of Jesus off the cross. I've seen many crucifixes in my life, but I've never seen the action of Jesus being taken off the cross. As the nails were pulled from his hands and feet, I felt a sense of calm and relief come over me, as if right there his suffering had ended. It's a feeling that I'll remember for many Good Fridays to come. Where I lived in León, I was able to hear a band practicing each week. Throughout the year, I thought to myself, who are these people playing this horrible march music over and over again? I did not know until after Holy Week that they were actually a procession band. As they began practicing in June for the next Holy Week, I saw them in a new light, and I started to enjoy the music they played. I saw their dedication to practice 3 times a week, 10 months of the year, for a 2-hour procession that could actually be canceled if it rained, amazed me, and it showed me that their faith was very, very strong. Reflecting back upon that time of year, I realized that many Spaniards do actually proclaim their faith loudly. They proclaim it not only in their loud march music, but also in their actions and their dedications to celebrate the most important time of the Catholic year, Holy Week. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Professor Landy said, I was born and raised in Venezuela, and I spent 2 years in Hong Kong before coming to school here. So I've got to experience Catholicism in a very different way everywhere I've lived. And so I try to compare those experiences with mine here in the United States. Like very Latin American countries, Catholicism plays a very important role in Venezuelan society. And I'd like to point out 2 distinct characteristics that I've found distinct after living in Hong Kong and here in the United States. While being in Venezuela, it seems all very natural. First and foremost, the devotion for Virgin Mary, right? In Mexico, they have Our Lady of Guadalupe, and in Venezuela, we have Our Lady of Coromoto, and it goes on with every country in Latin America. They have their own version of Virgin Mary. I thought it was particularly interesting how in schools we have our own version of the Virgin Mary for that particular school. So I studied in St. Ignatius of Loyola High School, and we have the Our Lady of St. Ignatius of Loyola High School. And so we had holy cards that they gave us at the bookstore, and for our graduation gift, they gave us a medal of Virgin Mary. And in the garden, this is actually from my sister's school. She's from Christ the King High School. So this is the Lady of Christ the King High School. This one's from my high school. I got my mom to take these pictures this week before the presentation. And so going from school to the house at home, that's another high school, I don't know which one. At home, we also have, it's not like shrines, but there are like particular places where we keep Virgin Mary. It has like a symbolic value of protecting the house when we're not there. And we light a candle every night we don't particularly say any prayer or anything. We just light a candle. I guess it's right there, that one. This is at my house, and this is at my uncle's house. There's a little candle right there. And so, like, every corner at every house, at least that I've been to back in Venezuela, there's a place for Virgin Mary there. And even though you don't actually have to say anything, just light your candle and off your way knowing that the house is safe. Also, a little brief story that my mom would get upset if I didn't tell it. So I was involved in this accident, on a motorcycle accident when I was 13. And the first person that people turned to pray to, unlike when I lived in Hong Kong and here in the United States, everyone turns to Virgin Mary. So, like, my mom claims, you know, you got to be very grateful and pray to Virgin Mary all the time, because when you had the accident, she was the first person that we turned to. So there's that. I hope my mom knows that I said it. And so I saw. So that's another difference that I thought, you know, when talking about praying, Virgin Mary is very present to people in Venezuela, probably most of the time above the figure of Jesus Christ. So, again, that was very normal for me. But then living in Hong Kong, I found it was quite the opposite, everything. I lived with many African students there, and the focus was more on the figure of Jesus Christ. Also, when going to Mass, we focus a lot on the actual scriptures and Bible studies, whereas in Venezuela, you would go to listen to the preacher. And so you would choose which Mass to go to depending on whether you like that preacher better than the other. That focus also, I thought, value of scripture, I was never exposed to it till going to Hong Kong. And so those contrasting experiences kind of like found a balance here in the United States where we pay attention to scripture, but I also get to choose which Mass to go depending on, you know, who's giving it. And so I guess that's just my experience as a global Catholic, and let's wait and see what's waiting for me in Mexico. I'm pretty sure it's going to be another experience to write it down and then hopefully help out the McFarland Center further down. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Koris. I don't have any slides for you today, but hopefully I can provide some visual pictures that describe them to you. I'm going to speak about my time that I studied abroad in Peru a couple months ago. If I could choose one word in English that would allow me to put my time in Peru into a framework for all of you today, it'd be the word location. It's not just that the nature of my experiences varied from the different places I traveled to, whether it was traveling in the Sacred Valley, swimming in the Madre de Dios, or hiking in the pre-Incan ruins in Cumbimayo. But location played a large role in my experiences with the very segregated factions of Peruvian society, and as such, with the very different manners of worship and religiosity in the Peruvian Catholic Church. During my time in Lima, I lived with a wonderful upper-middle-class Peruvian family that welcomed me with open arms into their home and ushered me into their familial routine. They lived in a very secure barrio called Jesus Maria, home of the soft-moving Peruvian vals, the famous Comida Criolla, and the first Peruvian Starbucks. And as such, their neighborhood was so manicured and clean in comparison to the rest of Lima that at times in my first few months there, I felt like I was in Miami. The religious life and worship of my Peruvian family and of the families of my friends that I met in university there were also reflected in this fashion. Very clean and tidy, with a large amount of separation between church life and what we call regular life. Mass was celebrated in a conservative fashion, following the influence of the Opus Dei in the city. And while I lived in a house with 3-foot statues of St. Francis of Assisi, there was no real presence of a lived worship in that small sub-community in Lima. However, in the changing of location, as I became more daring and attempted to master the seemingly impossible system of public transport in the city, I came into contact with a very different community of people and a much more transparent sense of a lived faith. Every morning on my way to class at the university, I would lock the doors to my family's gated house, turn down several sleepy side streets until I ended up at the banks of La Avenida Bolivar, a veritable river of cars, flatbed trucks, and combis. Combis, which are privately owned 12-passenger vehicles that technically have a set route, but you always run a risk because you never know where they're going to end up, are rampant and aggressive in Lima traffic. Yet they're recognizable by the religious paraphernalia and the painted slogans extolling obedience to God and peace among men. Each bus line was very unique, and every window shield commemorated a different popular saint specific to the hometown of the driver. Yet these popular saints carried much more meaning than that of sole location. Rather, it was the parallel that I saw between the myths of the lives of each of these saints that were created by these people and the actual reality of the lower classes in Lima that called to mind these popular saints' true significance. The story of each popular saint's life follows a narrative commonly found in the community of lower-class Peruvian society, a Peruvian that moves from the countryside into the city, seeking a place of opportunity and mobility to carve out a life more equal and dignified for themselves and their families, only to find an aggressive, unforgiving environment that stigmatizes their identity, their language, and their culture. In my experience, the devotion of my fellow Combi riders to their popular saints signifies a deep desire to feel God's solidarity with their community through the hardship that they encounter every day. The Combis, as vehicles that move about the city without restriction, interweaving between the wealthy barrios and the poorer ones, allow for the symbolism and spirituality of these developed, lived devotion to these saints to disperse and permeate throughout greater Peruvian society. As I've come to understand it, these depictions are not only forms of daily lived worship, but also a declaration of identity from an otherwise stigmatized and forgotten group of people. My experiences of faith in Peru challenged and affirmed my many future goals and ideals that Holy Cross had already begun to foster in me since I stepped foot on the hill as a freshman. In returning here after my semester abroad, I knew more strongly than ever that I wanted to pursue a degree in ministry. My hope is that when I leave this campus in 5 months, I will be able to continue to conduct my life asking questions, seeking understanding, and serving others, as Holy Cross has helped me to understand how to do, and also that my ministry will be informed by what I've learned here in my 4 years and my time abroad. Thank you.
So, between my sophomore and junior year, I traveled to South Africa on one of Holy Cross's Maymesters. Now, the focus of the trip was to study South Africa's educational system. But if you ask me what the focus of the trip was before I went on it and when I was applying, it was really my opportunity to go to the 2010 World Cup. Now, I know Holy Cross won't like to hear that, but I'm sorry. So even though the focus of the trip was South Africa's educational system, we did visit Regina Mundi, which you see pictured here. And this was a Catholic church in Soweto in the city of Johannesburg. Now, once inside the church, we noticed bullet holes throughout the church. And these were the result of a 1976 raid by the South African police under the apartheid regime, which broke up a worship service which they thought was a political meeting. And now, what struck me about these bullet holes was the fact that not only that the police would go into a place of worship, such as Regina Mundi, and break up a service, but that this church became the literal and figurative center of Soweto, as the only place where black South Africans could gather to worship, but also meet politically and discuss their plight under the apartheid regime. And this symbol of hope that the church came to stand for really resonated with me and was a distinct difference from what I had grown up with in Kingston, Massachusetts, attending church with my grandmother and my parents. And now, within the church, there was this image of the Black Madonna. And I had never encountered an image that imagined Mary as black, so it was very different to me. But what I soon came to realize in reflecting back on it, this didn't matter. What really mattered was what type of person was represented in the picture, not how visually they were represented. And I connected this idea that, as you see, Mary is holding the child of Soweto, and I connected this with the idea that the church became a symbol of hope, and that for these people, Mary was embracing them, as you see her embracing the child of Soweto in the picture. And if you notice at the feet of Mary, this little cloud-like image is actually the artist's depiction of Soweto. And in the middle of it, that sort of vague ball is Regina Mundi, and it stands as the center of Soweto. And so this church has become the center of Soweto in a literal and figurative sense. And Mary is watching over Soweto and providing a sense of hope for these South Africans, which I found extremely interesting. And it resonated with me because of the aspect of social justice that I have learned through my experience at Holy Cross and through Jesuit education, which I was able to connect outside of a place other than Holy Cross. Thank you.
How you doing? My name's Mike Rogers. One second. How you doing? Sorry, technology always messes with me. As Professor Landy mentioned earlier, I went to El Salvador over the past summer as part of the Chaplain's Office Urupe Immersion Program. And it was only for 10 days, but it was an extraordinarily powerful experience. And any chance I have to talk about it, I'm more than happy to. But this is, I'm going to talk about two, I guess, quick examples of churches that my group went to. Two of them are in the back right there, Colleen Mila and Cynthia Garcia. It's I think that they kind of illustrate a lot, especially when you put them in perspective, put them alongside maybe the American experience of the church. This is a church in Aguilares, which is a small region outside of the main city of San Salvador. And it's actually the burial place of Rutilio Grande, who was a Jesuit priest who was actually assassinated prior to their civil war there. And he's known as a figure of justice, but also as a figure whose death really inspired Oscar Romero to kind of start becoming the voice for the defenseless that he did become. And the interesting thing I found about this is just the almost folksy simplicity of it. You have this painting right on the back here with Romero right there, Grande around a table, and with you can't really see it because there's statues in the way, but of people around together, and which is on one level is kind of a nice. You see these in I guess American churches all the time. It's a nice idea, but in a country that I don't have time to go into the historical aspects of it, but in a country that's been ravaged by civil wars, El Salvador, this is in a lot of ways a political statement right behind the altar. And then alongside you have a lot of kind of not very this is a statue of Mary, lots of flowers, statue of Jesus. Very this is a small little village, a little hamlet. This is where you can actually see people praying here. At least I can. And then this is kind of a further back where you see it's not very it's this could be a PT where a PTA meeting's held, like a real center of the community. I also found these. I don't know why they're here, but there's a lot of lace. We went to other small little chapels, and this kind of overhanging that's coming down, which is, I think, kind of a nice effect. And this is actually I'll go back. This is the lower part of the main cathedral in the city of San Salvador. If you go to the as you can see, it's very low, it's very compact, very small. Romero is actually buried here. But the interesting thing about it is if you go upstairs, it's very, I'm going to say European, very high, very, all these beautiful all these beautiful windows. And then you go downstairs and it's like this, it's circular, and there's lots of people there. And throughout the Mass, people were moving, which I found to be very, very interesting. Like, as you can see right here, that's actually, that's Romero's tomb right there. And throughout the Mass, people were standing up, walking over, praying over him, going back to their seat. Throughout the Mass, people were walking around, talking to it. It was a real community sort of feeling there. And then one of the also very interesting things, I'm sorry I don't have a better picture, but at this Mass that we went to, there were all sorts of political banners. People were carrying, pictures, calling for justice, calling for, against government corruption, holding pictures of individuals who've disappeared, who they know. And at the end of the Mass, the sermon the priest gave was very, very forceful. My Spanish is absolutely abysmal, but you pick up, talking about the environment, talking about justice, talking about issues that affect the day-to-day lives of the people who he's talking to. And as he ended the Mass, the people kind of on their own just started chanting Romero. And it was very, very strange coming from I guess when I went home, the first Mass back I went to, the priest started talking about our duty as Christians and our duty to our neighbors. But nobody was moving, and nobody was really involved. And I think that there's something that we can, and I love this kind of idea, like, what can we learn about these different Catholicisms? And that's something I picked out of it. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Marello, and as Professor Landy said, I spent last year studying abroad at Trinity College, Dublin. I don't have any slides for you, but hopefully I'm able to provide you with a glimpse of my experience and how it shaped not only my understanding of Catholic practice in Ireland, but sort of my own understanding of my own Catholic faith. So Ireland is a predominantly Catholic country, and not to go into great detail about this, but Ireland's public policies have long been intertwined with Catholic beliefs. And this connection, I think, directly contributes to the truly public presence of Catholicism in Ireland, which was something that stood out to me immediately. On O'Connell Street, which is one of the busiest streets in Dublin, there's actually a small statue of Christ with a plaque under it that is sort of a blessing on the city of Dublin. And from what I observed, there wasn't any particular attention paid to the statue in the respect that there weren't flowers laid around it, or it didn't seem to be a site of prayer or memorial, but rather a testament to the way in which Catholicism is truly intertwined with the daily lives of Catholics in Ireland. So I thought that was very interesting that could be publicly displayed in the statue. And from what I can tell, this expression is also present in the homes in Dublin. I volunteered with Trinity's Vincent de Paul Society, and here I visited homes on a weekly basis, primarily 2 to 3 homes of people who needed company, who were in need. And one woman in particular had many pictures and statues of both Christ, but also of the Blessed Mother. And I think this devotion to the Blessed Mother was something that also really struck me. Often while attending Mass, I would notice that many people were praying the rosary throughout Mass. And this is something I've grown up watching my grandma do. My grandma immigrated from Ireland when she was 20, and 60 years later, she still does this. And my grandpa, who emigrated when he was in his teens, was responsible for giving me my first pair of rosary beads, which I almost always carry on my person. So I think that this is something that truly stays with Irish people, that this devotion to praying the rosary and to Mary. And the biggest struggle, I think, that I experienced while in Ireland was with regards to the lack of sort of attendance by college-age students in Ireland. I thought that sort of complicated my own understanding of faith, and sort of finding that I had initially expected that Trinity would have this established campus ministry program, and much like Holy Cross has here, but I found that this was not the case. Trinity's weekend Mass often receives little to no student attendance, so I was often attending Mass with communities from families in the area or from groups of tourists, so I thought that was very interesting dynamic. And I'm not able to comment on the private practices of students in Ireland, but I did observe what perhaps might be a shift in the nature of Catholic practice in Ireland that is beginning with its university students. So, thank you.